Hello and welcome to another one of our Brexit Explain videos. So I wasn't planning on making this video today because it's being filmed on my birthday, but unfortunately Boris Johnson didn't take my plans into account when making big announcements. That's because yesterday the government finally announced that it's planning to suspend Parliament for a Queen's speech on the 14th of October. In this video we're going to unpack what that sentence means and explain how it impacts Brexit going forward. Before we do that though, and I did come in to make this video on my birthday so you can forgive the promo, but I wanted to encourage you to check out our store. We have a bunch of pins up for pre-order and we've announced a couple of new designs, which I'll discuss at the end of the video. For all of that, head over to tldrnews.co.uk/store. And if you've already placed an order but want to add a few more items to your basket, then be sure to head over to tldrnews.co.uk/add to find out how you can do that. So, as I said a moment ago, the government has announced that it's planning on suspending Parliament for a Queen's speech on the 14th of October. This would mean that Parliament will be suspended from mid-September, most likely September 12th, all the way through to October 14th, just 17 days from Brexit D-Day. So let's break down that timeline in a little more detail. All members of Parliament are currently on recess, which means that they aren't currently sitting in the House of Commons. They come back from summer recess on the 3rd of September and will be sitting for about a week and a half before Johnson plans to prorogue Parliament, shutting it down on the 12th of September. Parliament would remain shut down in this prorogued state for nearly a month, all the way through to the 14th of October. On the 14th, they would hold the Queen's speech where the Queen would announce the priorities and objectives of Johnson's new government. Once the Queen had officially reopened Parliament with her speech, MPs would officially reconvene, giving them just 17 days until the Halloween Brexit deadline. Just as important is the 17th of October, just 3 days after Parliament reconvenes. That's because that's when the EU Council are set to meet to potentially agree to a new Brexit deal. That really doesn't give Parliament long to come up with a new plan. In fact, it gives Parliament a total of only 12 days. According to the government, this is standard procedure, with Conservative Chairman James Cleverly saying, or to put it another way, government to hold a Queen's speech just as all new governments do. That's because conventionally, every time a new government is formed, there's a Queen's speech to set out the government's aims and ambitions. But to put it frankly, that doesn't seem to be why it's happened this time. Many believe that Johnson and his government are suspending Parliament because it means that Parliament will have far less time to sort out a plan to block a no deal. Even if you were to accept this is just standard procedure, it's worth noting that this is a really long suspension. If you compare it to the two most recent occasions that Parliament was suspended for a Queen's speech not following a general election, those suspensions were only 4 days and 13 days. This time it's set to last 23 days. There's an argument to be made that this prorogation is so long because Parliament was already set to be closed between roughly the 13th of September and the 18th of October for party conference season. However, this doesn't entirely stand up as an argument, as MPs could have voted to cancel this recess, and there was a lot of talk about them doing exactly that. However, they can't vote to cancel this prorogation. Because of this, a lot of people suspect that it's not business as usual, and instead, an attempt to stop anti-no deal MPs. We did a video on the various methods that Parliament might use to block a no deal, and there's a link to that down below. But most of these different options require the full 2 months from September to the end of October to stand a chance of working. If Parliament is to be suspended for a month right in the middle of that time frame, then it becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for them to sort anything out. Also, any incomplete legislation being worked on before the prorogation would be scrapped, so it's not like anti-no dealers could begin developing plans before prorogation and then finish them afterwards. It all has to be done in one go. For obvious reasons, this plan has been pretty controversial. It's something the government flat out denied on Sunday, and the majority of MPs, including a fairly large number of Conservative MPs, aren't happy about it. Conservative rebel Dominic Grieve said to the BBC, "I think that the Prime Minister's decision is deeply questionable and frankly pretty outrageous. He knows very well that Parliament is very concerned about the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, and this has very little to do with starting a new session of Parliament. It is a deliberate attempt to make sure that Parliament doesn't sit for a 5-week period." Caroline Lucas joined in, tweeting, "Wasn't this meant to be about taking back control? The act of a cowardly PM who knows his reckless no-deal Brexit will never gain the support of MPs. A constitutional outage which Parliament and the people will oppose." And when it comes to people, it looks like our audience don't disagree. 85% of people on Instagram and 90% on Twitter said that they thought the government shouldn't prorogue Parliament. Interestingly, over 50% said they supported prorogation on Facebook, so it does seem that our audience is a little divided. Though, that being said, one bloke does seem to have shared our poll to pretty much every UKIP Facebook group he could find, so maybe that ended up skewing our results. But at least in the government's eyes, this doesn't really matter. Even if the majority of MPs aren't happy about it, there's not much they can do. Because this suspension of Parliament precedes a Queen's speech, Parliament doesn't get any say or vote on it. MPs can vote to approve or disapprove a recess, but they can't vote on suspensions. This means that the government just goes straight to the Queen via an advisory board known as the Privy Council and asks her to dissolve Parliament. There was never a whole load of discussion to be had about whether or not the Queen would approve the request, as we all really knew that she would. The Queen was always going to follow convention and grant this request, especially when the government's argument is that this is what governments always do. However, it did put her in a bit of a tough spot, especially with many in Parliament demonstrating their disapproval. In fact, Best for Britain Chief Executive Naomi Smith said that it would make no sense for the Queen to back this deeply undemocratic, unconstitutional, and fundamentally political manoeuvre from the government. If the Queen is asked to help, she would do well to remember that history doesn't look too kindly on royals who aid and abet the suspension of democracy. Despite putting her in a difficult position, the Queen did decide to sign it off. So, with her royal assent, what happens now? Well, this now means that there isn't enough time for anti-no deal MPs to pass legislation that would force Johnson to seek an extension. As we talked about in our video, which we're going to keep shamelessly plugging, any legislation would have to go through the Lords and the Commons, and this would almost certainly take too long. As it happens, the day before the government announced its plans, anti-no deal MPs had just agreed on this as their preferred method of stopping no deal. This is another reason why the government's official line that this is just business as usual seems a little suspicious. Literally the day after anti-no deal MPs come up with a plan, the government makes an announcement that just coincidentally stops that plan dead in its tracks. This means that anti-no deal MPs are now going to have to resort to the no confidence vote instead. This wasn't their preferred option because they couldn't decide who was going to be the temporary Prime Minister to ask the EU for an extension. Jeremy Corbyn naturally wanted that leader to be Jeremy Corbyn, but the Lib Dems and rebel Conservatives wanted it to be someone else. But sorting this out requires less time than legislation. If anti-no deal MPs can agree to a temporary leader, it could be done in literally a couple of days. So either in September before Parliament dissolves, or in October, after the Queen's speech on the 14th, but before the Brexit deadline on the 31st. This was almost definitely part of the government's plan. They're probably banking on the fact that anti-no deal MPs will be unable to agree on a leader. However, even though Johnson is trying to suspend Parliament, it's worth asking why he hasn't tried to suspend Parliament past the 31st of October, which is what anti-no deal MPs were really afraid of. If he were to do this, they really would have no chance to change anything before the deadline hit. We've discussed the prospect of such a prorogation a million times before, so we're not even going to do a brief run through of what it means. Just go and watch our video on it if you're interested. But safe to say, doing this would have made it even more difficult for anti-no deal MPs to stop a no-deal Brexit. So why did Johnson decide to end it on the 14th? It might not be a coincidence that the 14th of October is just a few days before the European Council Summit on the 17th and 18th of October, which land on a Thursday and Friday. It looks like Johnson is hoping to renegotiate a deal over the summit, and then bring it back to Parliament for a vote on Monday, which will be the 21st of October. If this is his plan, it's essentially the same as May's, trying to force a deal through Parliament by threatening a no-deal exit. This time round though, he's forced a decision to take place so late that it really is a case of his deal or no deal at all. This means that there's basically three outcomes from here. 1. Corbyn and the anti-no deal MPs trigger a no confidence vote, agree a temporary leader, and then there's a general election. 2. Boris gets some deal agreed and scares Parliament into voting for it. 3. No new deal is reached, anti-no deal MPs run out of time to pass legislation, and fail to agree on a temporary leader for a no confidence vote, and as such the UK leaves the EU without a deal. Only time will tell which one of these routes we will end up going down. One last thing, a little afterword for this video. I know we just pump out these videos in a pretty standard manner, and I sound pretty relaxed throughout, but let's be honest, this is completely insane. This is the government explicitly ignoring Parliament and basically lying about it. This whole thing has turned into a ridiculous constitutional battle between Remain or anti-no deal MPs and the government. Doesn't matter whether you're a Remainer or a Brexiteer, if you want a second referendum or a no deal. This has pushed British politics to its constitutional limits and has completely got rid of any good faith. We only say this because now we've had months of this stuff, and it's easy to forget how mental this actually is, but it is absolutely completely insane. Anyway, sorry if that got a bit gloomy, especially on my birthday, but hopefully that cleared some things up for you and that you enjoyed this video. Before we go though, I wanted to thank you all for voting in our Series 2 Pin Badges poll. We asked you to vote for the designs you wanted to see in the second series, and tons of you headed to our social media accounts to vote. Our patrons picked 2 designs, Scotland and the EU, and then we threw it over to Facebook and Twitter. Facebook chose Italy, and I'm happy to announce that Twitter selected Portugal, which means that you can now pre-order the Portugal design alongside all of the other ones we've announced, plus the entirety of Season 2, including 4 yet to be announced designs. Thanks so much to everyone who's bought pins so far and voted to let us know what designs you want to see. Be sure to check out all of Series 1 and 2 over at tldrnews.co.uk/store. As I said, if you've already placed a pre-order but want to add more items to it, then head over to tldrnews.co.uk/add to find out how to do that. If you want to be kept up to date with all of our videos, then be sure to hit the subscribe button. Also, by ringing the bell icon, you can make sure that you get notified every time we release a video. Also, if you want more from us, you can find us across all social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. And if you want your name featured at the end of the video, just like these people, then make sure to sign up to our Patreon. There's a link to that in the description.